Every time you open your mouth, you are bleeding information to people who will use it against you. That sounds harsh, but it is the absolute truth that nobody wants to tell you. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone just lost $1 million deal because they talked too much. Someone just destroyed a relationship because they could not keep their emotions in check for 30 seconds. Someone just killed their chances at a promotion because they needed to prove they were the smartest person in the conference room. Meanwhile, there is a small group of people who have figured out that silence is not the absence of power, it is the concentration of it. They have weaponized their ability to stay quiet, and they are winning while everyone else is still talking. The most powerful people in any room are not the ones doing all the talking. They are the ones sitting back, watching, calculating, and absorbing everything around them. While everyone else is busy trying to prove how smart they are, these individuals are learning secrets, identifying weaknesses, and positioning themselves 3 steps ahead of the competition. This is not luck. This is not genetics. This is a skill that anyone can develop. And when you master it, you become absolutely dangerous in the best possible way. Let me tell you something that changed my entire approach to success. Years ago, I was in a business meeting with some of the wealthiest investors in the country. The deal on the table was worth millions. Everyone in that room wanted a piece of it. And what fascinated me was not what people said, but what they did not say. There was one man, a self-made billionaire, who barely spoke during the entire 2-hour meeting. He sat at the end of the table, nodded occasionally, and took notes, while everyone else was pitching, arguing, and trying to dominate the conversation. He simply observed. When the meeting was winding down and people were starting to pack up their materials, this man spoke for the first time. He asked 3 questions, just 3. But those questions were so precise, so targeted, that they revealed he had understood every single detail that had been discussed. He had identified the gaps in the proposal that nobody else caught. He had noticed the inconsistencies in the financial projections within 5 minutes of speaking, and he had complete control of that room. The deal was restructured according to his terms, and he walked away with the most favorable position. That day taught me something profound. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. Most people have it completely backwards. They think that speaking up, being loud, and making sure everyone knows their opinion is the path to influence. But this approach reveals your hand too early when you talk constantly. You give away information. You expose your position. You show your cards before you need to. And in business, in negotiations, in relationships, and in life, the person with the most information wins. The person who knows what others are thinking, what they want, and what they fear has a tremendous advantage. Think about the best negotiators you have ever encountered. They ask questions and then they shut up. They let the other person talk. They let silence hang in the air, even when it feels uncomfortable. And you know what happens? The other person fills that silence. They keep talking. They reveal more than they intended. They give away their bottom line, their fears, their desperation, all because someone was patient enough to stay quiet and listen. This is not manipulation, this is intelligence. When you learn to be comfortable with silence, you learn to be comfortable with power. You stop needing validation from every conversation. You stop needing to prove yourself every time you open your mouth. Instead, you become a student of human behavior. You start noticing things that other people miss. You see the body language that contradicts the words. You hear the hesitation in someone's voice that tells you they are not being completely honest. You recognize the patterns that reveal what people truly want versus what they say they want. There was a young professional named Vincent who worked in commercial real estate. He was talented, ambitious, and hungry for success, but he had one major problem. In every client meeting, he talked too much. He was so eager to demonstrate his knowledge and close deals that he would interrupt clients, answer questions they had not asked yet, and try to overcome objections before they were even raised. His closing rate was below 30%. Now, he could not understand why. His presentations were polished, his knowledge was excellent, but something was not working. His mentor finally pulled him aside and gave him one instruction. In your next 10 meetings, speak only when asked a direct question. Ask your questions, then be quiet. Let the client talk. Vincent thought this was crazy. How could he close deals by saying less? But he trusted his mentor and committed to trying this approach. The results were shocking. In his very first meeting, using this method, the client talked for 40 minutes straight. Vincent learned that the client was going through a divorce, needed to liquidate properties quickly, and was willing to accept below-market offers for fast closings. None of this information would have surfaced if Vincent had been doing his usual sales pitch. He closed that deal in 3 days. Within 2 months of changing his approach, his closing rate jumped to 70%. What changed? Vincent stopped broadcasting and started receiving. He transformed from someone trying to convince people into someone who understood people. And when you truly understand what someone wants, needs, or fears, you hold incredible power. Not power to harm, but power to create win-win situations. Power to position yourself as the solution. Power to become invaluable. This principle applies everywhere. In your career, the person who listens in meetings and speaks only when they have something valuable to contribute gets promoted. In relationships, the person who listens deeply builds trust and connection that shallow talkers never achieve. In sales, the person who asks questions and listens carefully closes more deals than the person with the best pitch. Strategic silence is not about being passive. It is about being actively engaged in the most powerful way possible. You are gathering intelligence, building understanding, and positioning yourself for maximum impact when you do choose to speak. When you stay silent in a conversation, something fascinating happens on a psychological level. Human beings are hardwired to fill empty space, especially in social situations. Silence creates tension, and most people cannot tolerate that tension. They become uncomfortable, they start talking to relieve their own anxiety, and when people talk to fill silence, they stop filtering their words, they reveal truths they never intended to share. This is not theory, this is documented psychological fact. And you can use it to your advantage in every area of your life. Law enforcement officers are trained in this technique when interviewing suspects or witnesses. Experienced investigators know that the pause after an answer is often more valuable than the answer itself. They ask a question, get a response, and then they wait. They do not immediately ask the next question. They let the silence sit there. And what happens? The person being interviewed feels compelled to elaborate. They add details, they justify their previous answer. Sometimes they contradict themselves, all because they could not handle 15 seconds of quiet. The same dynamic plays out in business every single day. A supplier quotes you a price. Instead of immediately negotiating or accepting, you simply pause, you look at the number, you stay quiet, and you wait. That silence communicates volumes. It says the price might be too high without you having to say a word, more often than not. The supplier will start talking again. They will justify the price, or they will offer a discount, or they will throw in additional services. You did not have to argue. You did not have to threaten to walk away. You simply allowed silence to do the heavy lifting. There was a purchasing manager named Frank who handled procurement for a major manufacturing company. He was responsible for negotiating contracts worth millions annually. Frank discovered something powerful early in his career. After a vendor would present their pricing, he would close the folder, lean back in his chair, and say absolutely nothing for 30 seconds. Just sit there. The vendors would squirm. They would start talking. Within that 30 seconds of silence, Frank regularly got price reductions of 10 to 15% without saying a single word. His company saved millions because he understood that silence creates pressure. Now here is what separates strategic people from reactive people. Reactive people speak immediately. Someone says something and they respond within seconds. They defend, explain, argue, or agree without thinking. Their words are emotional responses, not calculated decisions. Strategic people, on the other hand, create space between stimulus and response. They hear something, they process it. They consider multiple angles, and then they choose their words carefully. This gap, this pause, this moment of silence before responding is what gives them power. Think about the last time someone criticized you or challenged your ideas. What was your immediate instinct? For most people, it is to defend themselves instantly, to explain why they are right, to counter the criticism with justification. But this immediate reaction puts you on defense. It makes you look insecure. It diminishes your authority. The powerful response is to pause, to let the criticism hang in the air, to think about whether there is any validity to it before responding. When you do this, you maintain control, you show confidence, you demonstrate that you are not rattled by opposition. A marketing director named Lauren learned this lesson the hard way. She was presenting a campaign strategy to the executive team when the chief financial officer interrupted her and said the budget was completely unrealistic. Lauren's first instinct was to defend her numbers immediately, but something made her stop. She paused for 5 full seconds, which felt like an eternity. Then she calmly asked, "What specific line items concern you most?" That question, delivered after a thoughtful pause, changed the entire dynamic. Instead of an argument, it became a productive conversation. The CFO explained his concerns, Lauren adjusted 2 elements of the budget, and the campaign was approved. If she had reacted defensively in that first second, she would have created an adversarial situation and likely lost the entire proposal. Building this kind of mental discipline requires practice. Your brain wants to respond immediately because it perceives silence as danger. Evolutionarily, we are programmed to fill quiet spaces because silence in nature often meant predators were nearby. But we are no longer living in caves. We are operating in complex social and business environments where the person who controls their reactions controls the outcome. You must train yourself to be comfortable with pauses. Start small. When someone asks you a question, count to 3 before answering. When someone makes a statement you disagree with, take a breath before responding. These micro pauses will feel awkward at first, but they build the muscle of self-control. The beautiful thing about strategic silence is that it forces you to think instead of just react. When you give yourself that buffer, you engage the rational part of your brain instead of the emotional part. You consider consequences. You think about what response will serve your goals rather than just satisfying your ego in the moment. This is how leaders operate. This is how successful negotiators work. This is how respected professionals conduct themselves. They have mastered the space between hearing and speaking. Consider also what silence communicates about you as a person. When you are not constantly filling every moment with words, you appear more confident, you seem more substantial. People perceive you as someone who thinks deeply rather than someone who just talks loudly. There is a gravitas that comes with being comfortable in quiet. It signals that you do not need external validation. You do not need to prove yourself constantly. You are secure enough in your value that you can simply exist without performing. This transformation in how others perceive you is not superficial. It fundamentally changes the dynamics of your relationships and interactions. People start coming to you for advice because they trust your judgment. They know you will not just react emotionally. They know you actually think before you speak. Your words carry more weight because you use fewer of them. The ability to pause before you respond is the difference between masters and amateurs in every field. Emotional control is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about choosing when and how to express those feelings. When you master silence, you master yourself. And when you master yourself, you become unstoppable. This is the essence of emotional intelligence that separates people who achieve extraordinary success from those who stay average their entire lives. Let me share something critical with you. Every major mistake you have ever made in your life probably happened because you acted too quickly. You said something in anger that damaged a relationship. You made a decision based on excitement that cost you money. You reacted to criticism in a way that hurt your reputation. Speed is not always your friend. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Wait, process. Respond when you are in control rather than when your emotions are in control. There is a principle I teach to executives called the 24-hour rule. Before making any significant decision, before sending that angry email, before quitting your job, before ending a relationship, wait 24 hours. Give yourself a full day to let the emotions settle and the rational mind to engage. You would be amazed at how different situations look after one day of silence and reflection. What felt like a crisis yesterday often reveals itself as a minor inconvenience today. What seemed like an insult yesterday might actually be constructive feedback today. The silence gives you perspective that immediate reaction never provides. I knew a talented executive named Richard who was being considered for a vice president position at a Fortune 500 company. During the final interview with the board of directors, one member asked him a provocative question designed to see how he handled pressure. The board member suggested that Richard's management style was outdated and asked how he planned to adapt. This was a direct challenge to his competence. Everyone in that room was watching to see how he would respond. Richard did something brilliant. He smiled slightly, paused for a solid 7 seconds, and then said, "That is an important question. Tell me what specific aspects of modern management you feel are most critical for this role." He turned the challenge into a conversation. He showed absolute composure under pressure. He got the position, and later learned that 2 other candidates had failed that same test by responding defensively. What Richard demonstrated was emotional mastery through strategic silence. He felt the sting of that question, but he did not let that feeling dictate his response. He created space between the stimulus and his reaction. In that space, intelligence lives. In that space, wisdom operates. In that space, you make choices instead of being driven by impulses. Think about the most respected people you know, personally or professionally. Notice how they carry themselves in difficult conversations. They do not get flustered easily. They do not rush to defend themselves. They listen to criticism without interrupting. They consider opposing viewpoints without immediately attacking them. This is not because they are weak or passive. It is because they understand that emotional reactions rarely serve your long-term interests. Short-term satisfaction from telling someone off feels good for about 5 minutes. Long-term consequences of that outburst can last for years. There was a sales representative named Nicole who lost the biggest deal of her career because she could not control her emotional response. She had worked on landing a major client for 6 months. Everything was going perfectly until the procurement manager made a comment that Nicole interpreted as dismissive of her company's capabilities. Instead of staying calm and asking for clarification, Nicole became defensive. She spent 10 minutes explaining why the procurement manager was wrong and why her company was superior. The energy in the room shifted immediately. The deal fell apart within a week. Later, Nicole learned that the procurement manager was actually testing her composure. He wanted to see if she could handle pressure and difficult clients. Her emotional reaction told him she could not. One moment of lost control cost her a 6-figure commission. Contrast that with successful people who have built reputations as unshakable. When you attack them, they smile. When you criticize them, they thank you for the feedback. When you try to provoke them, they remain calm. This drives their opponents crazy because there is nothing to push against. You cannot win an argument with someone who refuses to argue. You cannot intimidate someone who is not afraid of silence or conflict. This kind of composure becomes armor. It protects you from manipulation, from being baited into stupid decisions, and from damaging relationships that matter. Here is another powerful aspect of strategic silence. It creates mystery. When you do not reveal everything you think and feel, people become intrigued by you. They wonder what you are thinking. They pay more attention when you do speak because your words are not constant background noise. There is a reason why the most captivating people in any room are often the quietest. They have mastered the art of selective sharing. They understand that value increases with scarcity. And that applies to words as much as anything else. Mystery builds influence. When people cannot quite figure you out, they lean in. They try harder to understand you. They seek your approval because it is not freely given. This is not about being manipulative or playing games. This is about understanding human psychology. We value what we have to work for. We dismiss what comes too easily. When you offer your thoughts, opinions, and reactions constantly, they become cheap. When you share them selectively and thoughtfully, they become valuable. The most successful leaders understand this instinctively. They do not share every concern with their teams. They do not broadcast every doubt or fear. They maintain composure publicly while processing privately. This is not dishonesty, this is leadership. Your team does not need to experience every emotional fluctuation you go through. They need stability, confidence, and direction. Strategic silence allows you to provide those things even when you are working through challenges internally. You become the calm in the storm rather than another source of chaos. Knowledge without action is worthless. You can understand every principle I have shared with you, but if you do not implement these strategies into your daily life, nothing changes. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people fail. So let me give you specific, practical methods to develop this power of strategic silence starting today. These are not complicated techniques. They are simple disciplines that, when practiced consistently, will transform how you operate in the world. Start with the 70-30 rule. In any conversation, your goal is to listen 70% of the time and speak 30% of the time. This is harder than it sounds because most people are waiting to talk rather than actually listening. They are formulating their response while the other person is still speaking. They are thinking about what they want to say next instead of absorbing what is being said right now. Break this habit immediately. When someone is talking to you, focus completely on their words. Watch their body language. Notice their tone. Listen for what they are not saying as much as what they are saying. This level of attention makes you dangerous because you pick up information that everyone else misses. Practice the 3-second rule. Before responding to any question or statement, count to 3 in your head. 1, 2, 3. Then speak. This tiny pause accomplishes multiple things. It shows you are thoughtful. It prevents you from saying something stupid that you cannot take back. It gives your brain time to formulate a better response than your first impulse. 3 seconds seems like nothing, but in conversation, it creates a noticeable shift. People perceive you as more intelligent and measured. Try this today in every conversation you have. You will be shocked at how it changes the dynamic. Learn to recognize when silence is more powerful than words. If someone is venting their frustration, they do not need your advice or solutions immediately. They need to be heard. Stay quiet, nod, let them get it all out. If someone asks you a question that feels like a trap, pause. Consider whether the question itself is flawed or loaded. Sometimes the most powerful response is, "That is an interesting question. Let me think about that and get back to you." This prevents you from being cornered into a position you have not fully considered. If someone makes an outrageous demand in a negotiation, silence is your best weapon. Just look at them, say nothing, watch them squirm, and revise their position. You must also learn to read the room. Strategic silence is not about being mute in every situation. There are times when speaking up is absolutely necessary. The key is developing the judgment to know the difference. In a meeting where critical decisions are being made and you have information that could change the outcome, speak. When someone is being treated unfairly and your voice could make a difference, Speak when staying silent would compromise your integrity or values. Speak, but in situations where talking serves only your ego, where it would reveal your position prematurely, or where listening would give you more advantage. Stay quiet. This discernment comes from practice and honest self-assessment. Build your personal power through consistent restraint. Every time you feel the urge to interrupt someone, resist it. Every time you want to prove how smart you are by correcting someone on a minor point, let it go. Every time you feel compelled to fill an awkward silence, sit with the discomfort instead. Each of these small acts of restraint builds your self-control muscle. Over time, you become someone who operates from choice rather than compulsion. This is real power, not the power to dominate others through volume or aggression, but the power to control yourself completely. The compound effect of this practice is extraordinary. Think about where you will be 1 year from now if you implement these principles daily. Imagine walking into every meeting, every negotiation, every difficult conversation with complete composure. Imagine having a reputation as someone who never loses control, who always thinks before speaking, who sees what others miss because you are observing while they are performing. This reputation becomes currency. It opens doors, it creates opportunities. People want you on their team because they trust your judgment. They know you will not make emotional decisions that cost everyone money or credibility. However, I need to warn you about something critical. There is a massive difference between strategic silence and fake silence. Strategic silence comes from a place of strength and genuine engagement. You are present, attentive, and processing everything around you. Fake silence is just being passive or checked out. It is avoiding conflict because you are afraid, not because you are strategic. It is staying quiet because you have nothing to contribute, not because you are choosing your moments wisely. People can sense this difference. Authentic presence while being quiet radiates power. Passive silence radiates weakness. Make sure you are practicing the former, not hiding behind the latter. Let me tell you about a manager named Kevin who transformed his entire career through these principles. Kevin was a middle manager at a technology company. Constantly overlooked for promotions, he was competent but unremarkable. During a leadership development program, he learned about strategic silence and decided to completely change his approach. For the next 6 months, Kevin became obsessed with listening in meetings. He stopped trying to have the first answer or the smartest comment. He asked questions and then actually listened to the responses. He observed the politics and dynamics of his organization that he had been too busy talking to notice before. He started speaking only when he had something genuinely valuable to contribute. The transformation was remarkable. Within 3 months, senior executives started asking for his input specifically because when Kevin spoke, it was worth hearing. Within 6 months, he was promoted to senior director, jumping over 2 levels. Within a year, he was leading a division. None of this happened because Kevin suddenly became smarter or more skilled technically. It happened because he learned to harness the power of strategic silence. He became someone people respected, trusted, and wanted to follow. You have this same opportunity right now. Starting today, you can begin applying these principles. You do not need permission. You do not need special training. You just need commitment to practicing these skills consistently. Watch what happens over the next 30 days if you commit to the 70-30 rule, the 3-second pause, and strategic observation. Watch how people start perceiving you differently. Watch how your influence grows. Watch how you start winning negotiations, building deeper relationships, and making better decisions. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is potential. It is possibility. It is power waiting to be unleashed at exactly the right moment. When you master it, you become the most dangerous person in any room. Not dangerous in a way that harms others, but dangerous in your effectiveness, your influence, and your ability to achieve whatever goals you set for yourself. Stop trying to be the loudest voice. Start being the smartest presence. The world belongs to those who know when to speak and when to strategically stay silent.